All right, Shalom Aleichem Rabbi Isai. As the weather warms up and the world warms up and the news warms up, or maybe or not, or nobody quite knows what happens now and what happens next. The piece from Rav Kook that we're going to learn today is, it's hard to define in that it is so incredibly broad and far-reaching while simultaneously unifying that it's probably something that most of us have not ever seen before. It comes from the second chelek of HaKodesh, which is really volume 3, the first two and the second two, the way that they split up the books. And it comes from a section of the Sefer called Musar HaKodesh, where Rav Kook, for our purposes, is going to address the question of this Shabbos. Because this Shabbos, aside from being Parshas Vayakil Pekudei, is also Shabbos Mevarach Nisan and Parshas HaKodesh. And there is an overall question that needs to be addressed in the conversation about Parshas HaKodesh, in that this is, as Rashi tells us, the first mitzvah that the Jewish people are commanded in. And the obvious question is why? And Rashi quotes already at the beginning of the Torah that the Torah should have started from HaKodesh HaZelachem Rosh Chodashim. And then Rashi explains in Bereshis why that's not the case. That's not our topic for today. But the question of why is this the case? Meaning why is the first mitzvah that the Jewish people are commanded in, why is that mitzvah Parshas HaKodesh? And it's really just two lines. HaKodesh HaZelachem Rosh Chodashim. And then right afterwards, we go into all of the halachas of Pesach, specifically Korban Pesach, and then halachas of Matzah, and what's going to be when we are leaving Mitzrayim. There's a lot to understand. But it begins with HaKodesh HaZelachem Rosh Chodashim, which is a bizarre thing to begin with. Why is it that this is the first mitzvah of the Jewish people? So this is a sforna that we might have quoted in this context, but certainly in others over the past few years. The Sforna writes that the beginning of freedom is taking ownership over your time. That's a gewaldig klal in general. When you have freedom to determine your time, that is freedom. Your time is not owned. Having your time being owned by somebody else, that's called slavery. But the point that Rav Kook is going to make to us today is something that certainly relates to the Sforna's point, but it is far more overarching, far-reaching, and more profound than we might have considered. And that is because the story of Kiddush HaKodesh has something to do with the moon, obviously. And the moon is peculiar. Just to put it bluntly, we take the moon for granted as something in the sky that waxes and wanes. But it is the only thing in the sky that waxes and wanes.
Turns from banana to green cheese.
Right? It's the only thing. You look at... What you say?
Except for all the garbage we've launched.
No, the stuff that we've launched just wanes. Right? The Kadmonim already described Shiva Kochvei Leches, the 7 moving stars. Meaning there's 12 constellations, and then there are 7 things that move through them. Meaning that are not kind of plugged into the movement of the constellations. They are the sun and the moon, and then the 5 planets that we can see. Those are the Shiva Kochvei Leches. The furthest star, meaning planet, that could be seen in the days of Chazal was Saturn, Shabtai. That was the furthest out planet that could be seen, and that was it. You had 12 constellations and Shiva Kochvei Lechet. But from amongst all of those things, the moon is the only thing that waxes and wanes. And Chazal addressed this. This is a Gemara and it is a Medrash. What exactly happened to the moon that it waxes and wanes? Nothing else waxes and wanes. So this is the story that Chazal said at the beginning of Parshas Bereshis, of Sefer Bereshis, that the moon complained to HaKodesh Baruch Hu. Because the pasuk says that Hashem created Shnei HaMa'oros HaGedolim, the 2 great luminaries. And then you have Ma'or HaGadol, Ma'or HaKatan, the great luminary and the lesser luminary. And the question is, well, what happened to them? So our sages fill us in. What happened is that once upon a time, the sun and the moon were supposed to be equal. And then the moon complained and said, can it be that you have two kings with one crown? So HaKodesh Baruch Hu says, go and make yourself smaller. And Ad Hayom Hazeh, the moon is inconsistent in its sizing. Now, we know for our purposes, from a astronomical perspective, that the sun is much larger than the moon. How much larger than the moon? About 400 times larger than the moon. But curiously, the moon is also pretty much almost exactly 400 times more distant from Earth than the moon is. Which is why, when you look up at the sky and you compare the size of the sun and the moon, they are roughly the same size. Which is why you can have an eclipse. Because these two ma'oris are the same size from our perspective. You have the Ma'or HaGadol, the one that is always big, and the Ma'or HaKatan, the one that sometimes is big and most of the time is not. One day a month, right? On the 15th of every month is the day that the sun and the moon are equivalent from our perspective. Now the Shloah HaKodesh has a mahalach, all the Mekubalim have a mahalach in this. The Shloah HaKodesh explains that this is the soid, the great secret of the relationship between a mashpia and a mekabel, between a giver and a recipient. And that in a incomplete world, the relationship between giver and recipient is never full, is never whole, or is very seldomly whole. It's why you can have a Rebbe that is holding in Shas and Poskim and sits down with his group of seventh graders and explains to them a sugya in the most phenomenal, beautiful way, with scholarship and erudition, and they understand peanuts of it. Because the mashpia is giving, the mekabel is not able to receive. The giver is giving, the receiver is incapable of receiving. That's the relationship between sun and moon. The sun is that which provides light, and the moon is the one that reflects light. So the sun is pumping out light constantly, persistently, and the moon, which is reflecting it, is not able to reflect it with shleimus, with fullness, with wholesomeness. So what are you going to do? So in such a situation, the correct thing is to do the best you can. And then to pray and hope and yearn for an opportunity, like we say during Kiddush Levana, that Hashem should be mamale pigima salavana, that Hashem should fill in the hole that's in the moon. And then it'll be just like it was in Sheshis Me Bereshis. I know the astrophysicists deal with the question, well, what exactly would it look like? Is it possible to always have a full moon? So that's an interesting question. Is it possible fundamentally from a perspective of physics to always have a full moon? Yes. It would be possible, not to get into the, into too much of the space and geometry of it, but in theory, were it to be that the orbit of the moon around the Earth was 100% perpendicular, meaning absolutely perpendicular at a right angle to the orbit of the Earth around the sun, we would always have a full moon. The fact that the orbit of the moon around the Earth is not like that gives us these waxings and wanings. But in theory, it would theoretically be possible. I don't know if that's what the Medrash means, that when Mashiach comes, or at some point to the time of Geula, that the moon will always be full. Or maybe this is a mashal that Chazal are telling us. But, what you say?
That's by the Pegima. The Pegima is that the lunar month is shorter than solar.
So that's also true. There's also Pegima that we don't have the solar and lunar years being equal to each other. That's all. I mean, that is determined by the orbit of the moon around the Earth. So maybe that will also change. It will be exactly equivalent. Either which way, in order to be able to have a Jewish calendar, you need to be able to deal with these things, right? You need to be able to deal with the waxing and the waning of the moon, and you need to be able to deal with how to fit in 354 and a bit days into 365 and a bit days, which is why every 19 years we end up with a Jewish leap year. What'd you say? Correct, and there's no more Chodashim. There will be no more Chodashim. So is that what the end of the Pegimas Halavana means, that there's no more Chodashim? I don't know. But there is a piece of this which is essential for us to understand, in that the beginning of redemption is this discussion, is how to deal with the Pegimas Halavana. How to contend with the world where the moon and the sun are not getting along with each other. Like, what do you do now? How does this roll out? And Rav Kook summarizes this entire issue as part of the essential core of all flaws, faults, and failures in all of existence, which is in 3 words. Va'ani b'soich hagola, which is what the Navi says. The Navi is saying, the Navi Yechezkel speaks about exile as va'ani b'soich hagola. I have this vision of Hashem and I am in exile. What does it mean, I am in exile? So the heading of this page is Bakashas ha'ani ha'atzmi, seeking out the essential self. The essential ani. Definitionally, what is ani? And so Rav Kook writes as follows. Va'ani b'soich hagola, I am in exile. Ha'ani ha'pnimi ha'atzmi, the internal essential ani. Shel hayachid v'shel hatzibur, of the individual and of the collective of the community. Eina misgale b'toichi yosai, rak lefi erech ha'kedusha v'hatara shalai. And this ani, this identity of self, only reveals itself in accordance with its kedusha and tahara, with its transcendence and with its purity. Lefi erech ha'gvura ha'elyona, in accordance with the strength and power that comes from above. Hasvuga meha oira ha'tahara shel ziv mala, that is reflecting that which comes from above. Meaning the essential self of a Jew, and really of everything, is revealed in how much does it reflect the light that comes from above. What you say? So sofeg is to absorb, but you'll see that because we're relating this to the moon, as you'll see, that absorbing of it is that which allows it to shine forth. It says, Chatanu im avosenu, we have sinned along with our ancestors. And it begins a very long time ago with Chet ha'adam harishon, with the sin of the very first people that ever lived. Shenisnakeret la'atzmi, so that became strangers. Adam harishon became a stranger to his own identity. Shepana ledata shel nachash. How? Because rather than thinking himself, what is Ratzon Hashem, he turned to the nachash and thought, what do you think I should do? It was a giving up of his own thought, of his own awareness, of his own capacity to reason with Ratzon Hashem. Correct. He, instead of him choosing what the right thing to do is, he subcontracted that to the Nachash. And the Nachash made a choice of what Adam and Chava should do, and they went along with it. And in that, Ibeit es atzmo, he lost himself. Lo yada lahashiv tshuva berura al shelas ayeka. And when HaKodesh Baruch Hu says to you, Adam Rishon, where are you? So this wasn't a question of place. It was a question of identity, says Rav Kook. It wasn't a question of where are you. It was a question of where are you? Where's the you? There was a question in front of you. And rather than you answering it, you let somebody else, which is exactly what Adam Rishon says. When Hashem says to him, where are you? What does he say? She told me. Right? I mean, what does that mean? It means that the question of where's you, me, there's not me, it's her. It's giving up that identity, that autonomy, that bal bechira, that capacity to make a decision.
He actually sinned twice.
Right. Meaning, Hashem says to him, where are you that made that decision? And he says, I didn't. I gave it away.
I was following orders.
That was it. Meaning, I lost my identity. He says, because he no longer knew himself. He had given that away when he first sinned. Because his I-ness, hanius, his ani, was missing. By bowing to a strange God. What does that mean, bowing to a strange God? By acquiescing to some other power that is not HaKodesh Baruch Hu. The Nachash says, do this, and he goes, okay. That's Hishtachav Elzar. And then Chata Yisrael, the Jewish people sinned. Zana Acharei Elohei Necha. We followed strange gods, foreign gods. Says that's exactly the same chait. It is following after something that is not drawing light from above, enabling me to make my own decision. As ha'aniyus ha'atzmis azav. So the Klal Yisrael in Galus, we have lost our identity, we have abandoned it. Zanach Yisrael Tov, and the Jewish people have abandoned all goodness. So you have the Chet of Adam Rishon and the Chet of the Jewish people, and now you have Chet Haaretz. What the Psukim in Bereshis describe, that the sin of the land also occurs. What's the sin of the land? The land denies its own identity. Tzimtzuma es cheleha, halcha acharei magamos v'tachlitos, loy nasna es kol cheleha hakamus liyos tama itz ketama pri. There was once upon a time something called tama itz ketama pri. That the taste of the tree was the same as the taste of the fruit. But then the land sinned and it produced something that was not its primary product. And now trees no longer taste like their fruit. Meaning, the point of a tree is to grow fruit. So why does a tree grow anything other than fruit? Why does a tree grow something that's not what its primary goal is? So that's called Chet Haaretz. Thank you so much. Now, so ayin michutzla, it's like looking away from itself. Lachshav al davar garalos ukriros, to think about things that are happenstance. And kriros is both mikra, it's by chance, and also kriros, cold. By making these strange, cold calculations of fate and destiny, rather than the warmth of being a Baal Bechira, of making choices, of making decisions, of taking responsibility, of exerting autonomy. Which is the same as the Chet, says Rav Kook, as the Kitrug HaYareach, the complaint of the moon. That the moon avda sivuv pnimiyusa. The moon loses its internal orbit. Simchas chelka. The joy of its role, of its job. Chalma al davar hadras malachim chitzona. It's dreaming of being a different kind of king. V'kahoyle chaholim v'tzoylel ba'ovdan ha'ani shel kol echad shel aprat v'shel haklal. And so the world continues to roll away, losing its essential identity, each thing in its own madrega of the individual and of the collective. The earth was supposed to produce trees that tasted like fruit.
But how did it lose that ability?
Because it lost its essential identity.
By doing what?
So, because it didn't want to.
It lost its purpose.
Oh.
Didn't want to. Meaning, there is a purpose to everything. That's the core of this. That purpose is defined as the thing that HaKodesh Baruch Hu designed you to do, wants you to do. built you to do. And that is, each and every person is a reflection of Ratzon Hashem. HaKodesh Baruch Hu wants you to be here, wants you to be you. And then the question is, well, am I being me? Am I being the thing that Hashem wants me to be? Yeah.
You can see the sources of the first two. What is the source of the fact you said the earth lost its ground lost its?
So it's a big sugya. What exactly is the Chet Haaretz? Yeah.
Furthermore, the earth was supposed to produce bread. In other words,
Glucose, yeah.
right, that's part of this thing.
Yes.
I forgot what the source is, but absolutely.
Meaning, before Adam Arishon sins, so the pasuk says you can mikol eitz hagan teichel. You can eat from all of the trees. So it's a question whether the Chet Haaretz comes before the Chet Adam or the Chet Haaretz comes after the Chet Adam. But like you have the Chet of the Yareach, that the moon complains, the earth also sins. Now, we're not talking about inanimate objects here, obviously, that are exerting a will to deny the will of God. What Rav Kook is noting here is that when Chazal looked at Bereshis and saw an incomplete world that was made by a whole complete God, the question is, how does a perfect God create an imperfect world? And the answer is that a perfect God creates a world that has the ability to relate to him or not relate to him. And as much as the world relates to its purpose, then it is a reflection of that will of God. And if not, then it is misaligned. That's the Nakuda here. But the alignment is the key, and the alignment is what Rav Kook defines as ha'ani ha'atzmi, the essential self. So, for example, Rav Kook speaks about this within the context of the Jewish people as when we talk about indigenousness. So we spoke about this a few months back. So is the Jewish people indigenous to the land of Israel? Yes, in that it is the only place that we can grow naturally. That's what indigenous means. A plant that is indigenous to a particular location is a plant that grows best there. As opposed to, for example, and that's true of plants, and it's true of species, and it's true of animals, and it's true of people, as opposed to, for example, iguanas in South Florida. Iguanas are very matzliach in South Florida. Ma'od matzliach. But they're not indigenous, which is why every year or two, temperatures drop below whatever it is, and all the iguanas plummet out of the trees, because Florida is not where iguanas are indigenous. They're not indigenous, meaning they're misaligned to this location. They don't belong. Now, it doesn't mean that they can't live here, and it doesn't mean that they can't thrive here, and it doesn't mean that they're not going to reproduce like crazy and, eat all of your vegetation and, get splattered on the highways. It happens. There's lots of iguanas, but they're not indigenous because they're not where they're supposed to be. Or this became a big tumult during COVID, where all the planes were grounded for like a long time. So they had to ship out a whole bunch of these planes to the middle of like the Nevada desert. Because planes are safest in the sky. A plane on the ground is falling to pieces. A plane in the sky is working. Or if you've ever, gone away for a couple of months and then you come back to Florida and you get in your car and it doesn't start. So you're like, the battery's dead and the tires, because the car is in its best shape when it's being used as a car. If it's not being used as a car, then it's not going to work. I mean, it might, but it's not going to be optimal because it's missing its essential self. A car is designed to be driven. A plane is designed to fly. An iguana is designed to, be in wherever iguanas come from, right? Somewhere, the Amazon. Whatever it is. But it's that lack of self, that lack of identity, that is defined, says Rav Kook, as not receiving the light that HaKodesh Baruch Hu has designed, and that you see in the way that Chazal describe all of the misalignments in the world. And so he writes as follows, and this next piece, he brings it down into a very pragmatic and real relationship between students and teachers. He says, "By mechanchim mulumadim, you have these learned scholars, these teachers, mistaklim bechitzonius, and they look only at the externalities. Misichin deya gam heima min ha'ani, and they miss the essential nature and character of what they are and what they are doing. Umoisifin teven al hamedura, and all that they do is they put straw on a fire. What happens when you put straw on a fire? Big flames, but it doesn't last long. It doesn't work. Mashkim es ha'tzmim b'chometz, they feed the thirsty with vinegar. It's a drink, but it's not going to help. Mifatmin es ha'moiches v'es ha'lavavis b'chol ma'ashehu chutz mehem, they fatten up hearts and minds with all external things. V'hani holech u'mishtakeach, and the essential self, the essential character of what it means to be a Jew disappears. Kevan she'ein ani, and what happens if there isn't an ani, if there isn't a me, if I don't know who I am, ein hu, then there's no him, then there can be no relationship with the Ribbon Shalom, because there's misalignment. And therefore there's no possibility of me relating to you, because if I don't have a me, then there is no him, and then there's no you. And all of this is that loss of identity, of not knowing who I am and what I am and where I'm from. And so he explains as follows. Pasuk says, Ruach HaPeinu Mashiach Hashem. What does that mean? Ruach HaPeinu Mashiach Hashem? The spirit of our nostrils is the anointed one of Hashem. Very strange pasuk. We sing this. What does it mean? Ruach HaPeinu Mashiach Hashem. So he says, Zeu gvurasai hadar gadlai enenu mibachutz lanu. This whole institution, the idea of redemption of Mashiach, is not something that comes from outside the Jewish people. Mashiach Hashem comes from Ruach HaPeinu. It's something that is breathed out of the nature of the Jewish people. This is fundamentally completely antithetical to all of Western literature. All of Western literature has a hero that comes from outside. Right? Superman comes from another planet. Right? The idea is that you have the idea of the missionary. This is fundamental to Christian philosophy. The missionary that comes to educate the savage tribesman. That the Messiah comes from outside, or the Messiah comes from above. That's not us. Mashiach by us comes from within the Jewish people. He is born of the Jewish people. And the Mepharshim point out that the Torah is explicit in the fact that Moshe Rabbeinu is born. Because not all religions believe in this. That Moshe Rabbeinu has a mommy and he has a daddy. Moshe Rabbeinu, the greatest human being that ever lived, was a human being. Ruach HaPeinu Mashiach Hashem. Ruach HaPeinu. Mashiach comes from within us. Ruach HaPeinu, he comes from us. And as Hashem Elokeinu v'David Malkeinu nivakesh, we will seek out Hashem our God and David our King. El Hashem ve'el Tuvoi nivchad, and we will fear exclusively Hashem and His goodness. As Ani Shalanu nivakesh, we will seek out our essential selves. As Atzmeinu nivakesh v'nimtza, and if we look for it, we will find it. Which is what the pasuk tells us: Haser kol Elohei anichar. Get rid of all other things that you align your identity to. Haser kol zaru mamzer, take away all things that are strange and bastardized from the way that you live and think. Vidatem ki ani Hashem Elokeichem, and you will know that I am Hashem. Hamotzi eschem me'eretz Mitzrayim liyos lachem le'elokim ani Hashem. You will know that I am Hashem who took you out of Egypt to be your God. Ani Hashem. The essential ani, that's where you find Hashem. And with this, says Rav Kook, why does the Torah begin the Geula with HaKodesh Hazeh Lachem Rosh Chodeshim? Because you need to contend with the fact, when you look up at the sky, that the moon is not the way that it's supposed to be. Because it's lost its purpose. And if you can fix the Pigimas Halavana, if you can realize that there is something wrong with this picture, that it shouldn't be, that it's not whole, that it's not wholesome, that it's incomplete. If there's something wrong with it, and you realize that there's something wrong with it, and you can work on saying, well, wouldn't it be amazing if we could try to figure out a way for the sun and the moon to get along with each other again? That's called Ibra HaKodesh. That's called Ibra Shana. That's called Rosh Chodeshim. Recognizing that there is a cycle of this, and that you can fix it. That you can find what the purpose of the moon is, and that you can draw in that light, and that you can reflect it. That's called Geula, because it is Viratem ki ani Hashem Elokeichem. You will know that the ani is where you're going to find Hashem. Hamotziaschem me'eretz Mitzrayim, takes you out of Egypt. To be your God, ani Hashem, I am Hashem, the ani. That's where you find Him. That's it.
To me, this is twofold. Number one, He reminds you that every month, if you don't remember this month, remember next month.
Right.
About the rebirth of the moon, what it means, and also now this has a whole different meaning to what Pesach is all about.
100%. Because the whole of Pesach,
A whole different meaning.
to what Pesach is about. The whole purpose of Chag HaPesach is discovering Ani. That's it. To discovering your Ani and his Ani. That's it. Be'ezhem Yisbarach, dear sweet and holy friends, to be continued.